Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to the Global Career Forum, the international online recruiting event organized for the MBA students from top business schools. We welcome you to today's online session with Mira, and we have the pleasure to welcome for this live session our two keynote speakers, Jorge Sanchez, who is the Portfolio Management Subdirector at Mira, and Anais Avila, the OD and Talent Development Manager. As this is a live Q&A session, I do invite all participants to ask your questions in the Q&A panel on the top right side, and we'll convey them to the speakers. Jorge and Anais, warm welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
So perhaps to kick off this session, could you share with us a little bit more about your career background and your position, your role currently at Mira?
Yeah, sure. Hi guys. So I'm Jorge Sanchez. I've been in Mira for around 2 years. Before that, I was an investment banking associate at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Prior to that, I studied an MBA at NYU Stern, and I started my career at a real estate institutional private equity fund, which is Prudential Global Investment Management. So right now here at Mira, I've had a couple of positions. I've worked as director of the pre-development department, and right now we're at the portfolio management, which is part of the finance team, where we overlook returns and profitability at a project level, at a fund level, and at a general partner level.
Hello, everyone. My name is for almost 5 years.
Oh, Anais, we actually don't hear you.
Okay, I'll start again. I'll be in Mira 5 years this year. I'll see all the recruiting and development plans here, all the succession planning, performance review, all the individual development plans, and other strategy of recruiting positions. I want to present Ana Santiago. She's part of my team. She's also in recruiting and HR responsibilities.
Hi everyone, my name is Ana Santiago. I'm with Anais in the HR team. I have been in Mira for 2 years. I started my career in another company that was like publicity, and I have been developing in Mira in recruiting, in organization development, and every HR area.
Excellent. Thank you for these introductions. Could we spend a few moments talking more about the company's business mission? What are today's challenges?
Sure. So Mira is a real estate private equity company. As of today, we have $1 billion in assets under management. These are divided in 3 funds. Our first fund, vintage 2008, is just about to exit the investment. Our second fund, which is a 2014 vintage, we're 2 investments in and fully committed and invested. And finally, our last fund, which is a mix of public and private vehicle. It's comprised of investments from Mexican pension funds, together with a Canadian pension fund. That's a $400 million equity commitment. As of today, we have 2 active investments, and we have yet to deploy around 50% of our capital in that fund. So Mira's business plan is focused on raising funds to invest in real estate communities in Mexico. We prioritize among our investments what we call mixed-use communities. So these include a residential, a commercial component. By commercial component, we focus on office developments and shopping center developments.
Thank you. What about a company's future? We talked a little bit where the company is today. What about a direction in which it is evolving next 5-10 years?
So yeah, as any other private equity firm, the the purpose of our, or the mission of us as a general partner is to keep raising funds. So right now, the last fund that we raised, as I mentioned, was focused on mixed-use communities. So our mandate includes that we should develop communities that have both a residential and a commercial component. Looking forward, we're looking into opening new funds which are residential only focused, and on the other hand, what we call in the industry as core funds. Mira is a company with around 10 years in the market, so we have developed capabilities and a team that has developed this sort of like knowledge and know-how regarding operations and property management, which we want to capitalize by raising what we call a core fund. This core fund will look into, instead of developing projects from scratch, we will look into acquiring, let's say, what we call opportunistic assets, which are poorly managed or that can be facelifted to achieve better returns.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask Anais a little bit more about the three openings that we are currently promoting through the platform. So the Director of Sales and Marketing, Project Subdirector, and Project Manager. Could you walk us through it in terms of what you're looking for these profiles?
Yes. For the project manager and the sub-director, we're looking for people with experience in real estate, especially in financial models, and something in real estate. They need to know something about that. The sub-director specifically works in a project. It's going to be a new project in Querétaro that is like, how many hours? 2 hours from Mexico City. Querétaro is growing very, very fast. And the project manager will help him to develop all the project idea, all the model, and to follow up and make the controls for timing and specifications with construction. The sales director, nowadays we don't have a commercial head. We're looking for a commercial head too, and the sales sub-director is going to lead a group of 4, maybe 5 sales managers that each sales manager are based in a project. So this sales director makes all the strategy to coordinate and make the process the same in all the projects. Yes.
What about when we talk about behaviors and skills, when we're talking about a fit with your company culture? What should candidates be aware of?
Culture, we look always for really proactive people with a lot of energy, that are result oriented, and that have like the highest ethical values, because it's like a value we look for in every person that is in Mira. Okay, so that are the soft skills, I think. We also look for, in these positions, people that are really analytical and that can deal with numbers, and that can deal with like other cultures, because they have a lot of exposure with our investors and with our senior management. So that is really important. And I think the most important thing is that they are result oriented.
Excellent, thank you. A question from the audience is, if you could share with us examples of projects that new hires would be working on.
Yeah, why don't I jump into this? So new hires, as Anais mentioned, would be working on the first investment of our latest fund. The one that I mentioned is with the Mexican pension funds and a Canadian pension fund. This project is located in the city of Querétaro, which, as Anais also mentioned, is 2 hours away from Mexico City. And what we're planning around this project, it's a pretty sizable land area. It's around 80,000 square meters, and we have projected a 10-year life cycle for this project, which will consist of what we call a mixed-use community. So it'll have residential inventory for sale. It'll have a shopping center. It'll have an office development, and finally, it'll also include a hotel development. So, as I mentioned, this is a pretty large-scale project. We're projecting it 10 years, and it'll be developed through several phases.
Thank you. And when we talk about these roles, what are the performance expectations for, say, first 12 months? To who would people report to?
So for example, during the period in which we just acquired an investment and we're developing a business plan, let's say that the sales sub-director would be reporting directly to our pre-development team. So the pre-development team within Mira is in charge of breaking down the business plan that was approved by our investors from property acquisition to start of construction. So during this period, it comes all the strategic thinking and all the strategy and business plan development. So from a sales sub-director perspective, they would be targeting, let's say that their position would be focused on the right price for the product, the right sales strategy for the product, what are the expected sales levels, let's say on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis, and that sales director would also be hiring and let's say training a sales force task that would be in charge of putting all of our inventory into the market. A lot of business intelligence, a lot of strategy to know our competition, and to find the price and price and both the payment options within our core market.
Perfect, thank you. You touched upon it already a little bit, but could you elaborate more on how the company is structured? What are the different departments?
Yeah, for sure. So our company, if we look into a standard project life cycle, as I mentioned, first of all, we need to invest our investors' equity into a project. So we have an investment team, which is in charge of maintaining relationships with external real estate brokers, and what they are looking for is the right property for Mira to develop one of their mixed-use communities. Afterwards, when a property is acquired, we have a pre-development team, which, as I mentioned before, will be in charge of developing the whole business plan from property acquisition to start of construction. Afterwards, when a project is already ongoing, the pre-development team will hand the keys of that project to a specific development team, which will be in charge of the day-to-day operations and development of that project. Finally, as I mentioned, our projects include commercial real estate components. So when a property is fully developed and the commercial components are already stabilized and ready to lease, the development team will hand out the keys of the project to an operations and property management team. Above this project structure, let's say, we have a full team of finance, which I am working on. So we will review the profitability and returns of our projects, of our fund, and of Mira as a general partner of diverse private equity funds. We also definitely have a legal structure, and we have a full-blown construction team. So unlike other general partners from private equity firms, Mira has an in-house development team So instead of subcontracting other companies to develop our projects, Mira does this in-house. And I guess that pretty much covers our structure.
Thank you very much. In terms of growth, where do you see growth and where do you tend to have MBA profiles?
So, but part of the structure that I mentioned included development teams. So every time that Mira closes on a new project, given its large scale, we consider that a fully staffed project team includes a project director, a project sub-director, a couple of senior analysts, and an analyst. So obviously there's space for growth there. As I mentioned, we've only invested around 50% of our latest fund. So whenever we close a project, we need to staff a full project team. Afterwards, from our team's perspective, as I mentioned, portfolio management, as assets under management increase, we will definitely need a greater headcount because all of the reporting activity we have to present to our investors. So whenever we close a new fund, as I mentioned before, we're looking into a residential only product or a core fund, we need a structure to support that fund. So there's also room for growth there. And finally, from a general partner perspective, well, it's not the same to manage one fund than to manage three, to manage 4 funds. So we definitely need to increase our headcount at a Mira level.
Thank you very much. When we talk about competition, how does Mira compare to other real estate funds? How do you differentiate yourself?
Well, as I mentioned before, first of all, when Mira started in the real estate, the private equity market here in Mexico, we noticed that whenever we wanted to subcontract other local offices or developers to develop our projects, we noticed that we were missing some extra capabilities or some extra knowledge. So Mira decided to differentiate from other funds from having all of those third-party contractors capabilities developed in-house at Mira. So that if we compare Mira's structure to any other fund, this is an added value to any investor looking into putting their capital into Mira, because we're a fully vertically integrated real estate development platform. Another factor that differentiates Mira from other funds is that Mira has the capabilities to develop large-scale mixed community products. So as I mentioned before, Mira has a track record of developing projects of large scale, which include residential and commercial components, whereas other private equity funds here in Mexico focus on a single project. Let's say that one fund is specialized in only developing shopping centers. There are other funds focused only on residential components, but none of these have the scale and the mixed-use component that Mira has.
Thank you very much. Another question from the audience is, what is the duration of the investments from start to finish versus the duration of the funds, and how do you reconcile the difference between the two?
Yeah, so on average, our investment funds have a duration of 10 years. So we're looking at our investments of our projects to have a duration of around 8 years max. So let's say that from that year 8 to the year 10 of the closing of the funds, that's sort of a cushion that we have to execute an orderly sale of any remaining asset within our fund structure. So for example, in our first fund, we had a mixed-use community in the city of Monterrey, which included 5 phases of residential, 1 shopping center, and 4 office buildings. When we were into year 8 of the fund, we realized that we were only 3 residential phases in to developing our project. So since we are already packing things up and closing the fund, what we're doing right now is we're disposing our remaining land inventory because we couldn't develop it within the fund term. So we're right now undergoing a sales process where our remaining land inventory will be sold to another fund, which, let's say that the development plan for this land will be in line with the other funds, the prospective buyers funds, development plans.
Thank you very much. Another question from the audience is, what portion of the latest fund is coming from the second fund in terms of investments?
So here's something very particular with private equity firms. We have a fiduciary duty or a mandate with each of our funds have different investors. So we have to be creating what we call a Chinese wall between the investment opportunities of each of our funds. So the scope of our second fund compared to the scope of our third fund is completely different. We have different investors. We have a different investment mandate. So we cannot be switching or flipping properties from one fund to another. If we do so, which it may be the case, we haven't done so, but it does happen in private equity firms, there has to be a high level of scrutiny because you have to provide let's say we have to match to the best of our efforts what the market conditions are outside our funds, so that, let's say, the deal makes sense both from the fund investor who's selling to the other fund investor who's buying. So we have to be very careful with that.
Excellent, thank you. What are the different exit options that you have had in the last fund? Do you always maintain the property until the finalization of the project, or do you sometimes exit before that?
Well, it depends on the type of asset that we have in our community. So, for example, I'm going back again to our project in Monterrey, which was a mixed-use community. The shopping center of this community was fully stabilized, and what I mean by stabilized is that the space was completely leased in May of 2016. So once we reached stabilization, that part of the community was sold to another private equity firm. Afterwards, regarding our residential component, Mira has an in-house sales team, so we stick to our residential inventory until we sell our last unit. So our last unit sold for the residential inventory in that community was just in December of this year. And finally, the land inventory that is still remaining and we will not be able to develop given that our fund is closing, we will have to sell it to a third party. So let's say that there's no specific route into divesting our projects. We find the most suitable route to divest depending on the components of each project itself.
Thank you. Looking at your career at Mira and looking at your colleagues, some senior management, what would you say is the type of a person that succeeds at your company?
Sure. Once again, I'll try to be a bit general about private equity firms, and I'll say this coming from both from a background from banking, which is what we call the public side, and private equity firms would be the private side or the buy side. What's very important from a buy side perspective is accountability. I find out personally that all of the decisions that you make within a private equity firm will come back to haunt you. And what I mean by that is that you need to have a very high level of accountability, because the investments that are going to be within a fund, as I mentioned, are long-term investments and a large-scale investment. So you need to be very accountable. You need to have a high level of attention to detail. You need to assume responsibility of the decisions that you take, because unlike other opportunities in the financial side, private equity firms get to live through what they decide or through a business plan, and you have to be very proactive to react to whatever deviation you have from a business plan.
Thank you. What made you personally want to work at Mira?
So, what I was coming back. I was coming from a background in investment banking, and all of you may know, it's a pretty grueling work. Demand is pretty hard, and I find that sometimes a job at banking is pretty limited in terms of, as I mentioned before, accountability, leadership, and responsibilities. Uh, Moving into a private equity fund, it gives you a much strategic perspective of business. Obviously, the work hours aren't the best still, but it's much better than banking. But I'd say that it's the accountability side and the sustainable growth career plan. What drove me to Mira?
Excellent. Thank you very much. On average, how long do people stay in the same position, and how does Mira promote career evolution change?
Yeah, so something that we're working in at Mira. Previously, the growth opportunities came through the development or the closing of new projects. Let's say that if someone was an analyst at the GP level and we closed a new project, and that person would be promoted to a specific project with a higher position. Nowadays, that the company has much more funds and more assets under management and a sustainable growth plan going forward, we're looking into creating a more structured career and development plan. I'm going to let Anna or Anais fill this in with more information about the career development plan.
Career plan, I think,
Anna, can I just ask you to move closer to the microphone? Thank you.
yeah. Do you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I think a person stays normally in a position for 2.5 years or 3. It depends on the level of the position. I don't know. Maybe an analyst stays a little bit minor time, but I don't know. Maybe a manager stays a little bit longer. No, it depends on the position, but I think usually it's 2.5 years to 3 years. A person stays in a position. Like Jorge said, it depends in the. Usually we grow with the projects and the funds we have. Right now we're having a lot of projects and we are like closing a lot of deals. So right now the career path is more I don't know how to say more structured, and we are this year we are trying to set like the structure and the path for every person, so we have more timelines defined. But it depends in the person, in the project, and career path every person wants to follow. Maybe one person wants to switch to some area that has to do with the previous area they were in, and we can do that. But obviously the career path will be different as if they like to stay in the same area, which they already have some expertise in. So I think it depends. Maybe or the usual thing is 2.5 years to 3 years, and the projects we have and the career path the person would like to follow, and the career path we have for each person.
Anna,
Yes,
I want to add something very
of
important.
course.
We have like very high potentials that are our analysts. Most of our analysts grow to senior analysts, and something that we expect to happen is that they leave to an MBA. So that's why we are very interested in this forum, because 99% of our leaders have any master or especially MBA in the very top university, especially USA. So we have these positions that are key positions. However, we expect them to leave because our leaders have these type of studies. So some of them leave, and we are trying to make a plan to make them come back after the MBA. So in this moment, having like this forum with all of these candidates that are studying an MBA, it's like something we expect to happen. Sometimes we post positions in the university. However, I know Mira is not top of mind company, but having this conversation, I hope many of all you guys know more about Mira, that we are a very huge company and with many stability here in Mexico, with many projects that are going and are moving this year.
Thank you very much. Perhaps the last question, how accessible is top management to the new hires? Is there a formal or informal mentoring system in place?
So we have an open door policy with our senior management. Our senior management, I've lived through it, is very hands-on. They're not the managerial type of guys that are overlooking stuff. These guys will come right into your desk. They'll sit with you, chat with you, see the way you think, will challenge you, there's always an opportunity to speak up within our meetings. And so I'd say that's the best mentorship that you can get from someone in a senior position, that they're open to listening to you, to your opinion, that help you shape your ideas based on their experience, and that they are extremely approachable. I mean, anyone from senior management can invite you any given day to have lunch with them, right? And you'll get to speak with them about anything regarding work or your personal development plan. So that's something that I found very, very valuable here within Mira, which is the approachability of senior management.
Thank you very much. Before we conclude today's session, I wanted to ask you any last-minute advice to the candidates, to those who would want to apply for the positions at Mira.
Yeah, I think I mean the best advice would be just try. It's not only a matter of us finding a fit with the candidate, but the candidate likewise should also find what's the best fit for them. Some people will like the Mira culture, others won't. So just find the right fit, because it'll make the work easier, both from our perspective and both from the applicant's perspective. So yeah, stay true to your values, to your culture, and find the best fit for it.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Do you, Anais, do you want to add anything on this?
Well, I think that if anyone is interested and need more information about Mira, they can get to our webpage or send us an email so we can have a personal and individual another talk if it's needed.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, the three of you, for your time today to share more about career opportunities at Mira. And to the candidates, we are going to put a recording of the session on the website within a few hours. Thank you again.
Thank you.